Hi, everyone, and welcome to Smart City Kids, workshop laying the foundation. My name is Jill Ortman, and I'm a college counselor or consultant here at Smart City Kids. Just to give you an idea of who I am, I've been working with students with the college application process for more than 20 years now, both in the United States and internationally. Prior to joining Smart City Kids, I worked for almost 12 years at an international and independent school in New York City, where as head of the Department of Counseling, I had students from the United States and countries from all around the world. I raised my two daughters in Quito, Ecuador, and both are graduates of my alma mater, Brown University, where I received both my master's and my bachelor's degree. Now that I've introduced myself, and before I introduce my co-host, Marielle, I'd like to tell you a bit about Smart City Kids so that you know that we're here for you if you need us. For the past 20 years, Smart City Kids advisors have guided parents and students through the admissions process for entrance to all grades, starting with nursery school and continuing all the way through college. We include boarding schools and schools for special needs students as well, so we can meet what any of you need and are experienced in all areas. We have clients that are schools as well, and we support them with anything that they need. And in addition, we work with a variety of corporations to provide workshops on parenting, education, and admissions. We also have a very experienced group of tutors who support students of all ages and abilities through our Smart City tutors. I'll provide you with contact information for all of our programs at the end of this workshop. Now I'd like to introduce you to Marielle Kessel, who will be joining me in this workshop.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jill. My name is Marielle Kessel, and I am also a college consultant here with Smart City Kids. I come to Smart City Kids with a background in higher education in a couple of different areas. Probably my most contiguous one would be as former Associate Dean of Undergraduate Admission at Princeton University, where I oversaw much of our admission process, including athletics, international applications, arts applications, and students with a talent in math and science. After my time at Princeton, I was director of MBA admissions at Said Business School at Oxford University. So I have extensive background working with students who are also interested in business. But my true passion lies in working with children as they are, students as they are working towards what is really a truly momentous step in their education and also their lives, which is applying for college. So it's something that's exciting to do, and I'm able to take that knowledge that I gained at Princeton and then translate that into putting together some really wonderful applications, which is what Jill and I are here to speak with you about today. So one thing that's really important and something that we do with all of our students, no matter where they are in the process, so whether you work with us for the 4 years of high school or you join us for the last year and a half, however you decide to come in on this process, is we think about setting our intentions. Something that we really believe in, something that really comes across in applications, is making sure that the intentions are centered around yourself. So finding purpose, balance, and a strong sense of self. Applications that demonstrate that are themselves inherently strong and easy to read, something important when schools get tens of thousands of applications. And they also help students identify who they might like to be in the future, setting them up for success once they go to the college and university that they have found would be the best fit for them.
Before we go on, I'd like to ask you to participate in a very short poll. Okay, if you can just let us know which grade your child is in, or if you're a student, which grade you're in, that would be great. Okay, and then a second question for you is whether or not you're a student or an adult. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go on.
Thanks, Brad. Great. So whether, I see now that we have, I would say, half of our attendees are past ninth grade, about half of them are in ninth grade, but wherever you are in the process, these values and these guiding principles should see you through. So the first, starting off in ninth grade, is pursuing academics. I think sometimes people lose sight of the fact that these are first and foremost academic institutions, and they are admitting students based off of their academics. So pursuing academics that are going to play to a student's strengths. I think that's something that's also very important to keep in mind. Does your student excel in all areas? Does your student have a specific focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics? Is your student an art student? What would be the best way for them to pursue academics? I don't think there is a one shoe fits all way to do this. And I think it's really important to have that intention again and setting that purpose at the beginning of this. Exploring a variety of extracurricular activities is extremely important at this time as well. Schools like to see dedication over time, and they like to see an increase both in responsibility and hours dedicated to certain activities. Therefore, it's a great time to really branch out and see what it is you like to do, and perhaps maybe even better, what you don't like to do, so that you don't have to then do that for the next 3 years. So really thinking about what might you like to participate in, how would you like to show that not only are you very good in the classroom, but that you're also going to be a good citizen at whatever school you do attend. So how are you going to make them proud and make their campus universities really vibrant and exciting places to go? Ninth grade is a great time to practice developing relationships. Eventually, you will have to ask for letters of recommendation, and you want to learn how to build that rapport with your teachers and with your school counselor in order to ask for those letters and have really great letters written about you. I think sometimes students forget that they are going to have to also be advocates for themselves in this process, and so it's very good to have those relationships early. Something that we should all probably do often is assess your likes and dislikes. So really thinking about, what are my strengths? What do I like to do? What do I dislike to do? And how might I use that information to think about how I want to plan for my future, right? So that's something that's really keen to keep in mind. So I really like business. Great, that's wonderful. You might then want to consider both the academic side of that, so pursuing courses that perhaps like statistics or higher level mathematics courses, or thinking about joining the entrepreneurship club. Maybe you're interested in starting your own business, thinking about what that business is, and starting that sooner than later would be a great way to do that. Or perhaps your dislikes, right? I don't like my school, it's much too large. Perhaps you aren't going to be looking at large universities. That already helps narrow and tailor the process for you. And then finally in ninth grade, considering outlining your summer goals. So what might those summer goals be, right? I think ninth grade schools tend to really focus more on 10th and 11th grade summers, but ninth grade is a great time to think about how you might like to frame those 10th and 11th grade summers, but also it's really I would say the last summer you have, sort of enjoy yourself, really figure out what it is you'd like to be doing. But thinking about what those summer goals might be. Are you interested in having a job for the first time? Are you interested in getting a lot out of the travel that you have with your family? Is your goal to read 50 books? Is your goal to study really hard and take a placement test so you can take the higher level French class at school the following year? What are those summer goals and how will they set you up for further success down the line?
If you have any questions, please put them in the question and answer box rather than the chat. And I hope that as we're speaking, some thoughts will occur to you about things that you would like to know more about. Okay, so now we're going to talk about 10th grade, and this is another of the foundational years when you're really laying the groundwork for the more advanced classes you'll be taking in the 11th and 12th grade. So 9th grade is very early to be projecting a 4-year plan, and many high schools do not even give students leeway in picking 9th grade courses. But as you start 10th grade, it is a good time to start thinking about where you'll want to be in the 11th and 12th grade. And this is because a lot of advanced courses, whether they're honors, AP, IB, or whatever it is your school offers, many of them will have requirements, and you want to be sure that you are meeting those so that when you go to course selection for 11th grade, you don't have a very disappointing time with picking the classes you want. Again, we're asking that you pick and pursue a demanding curriculum. What's demanding for one student, as Marielle said, will not be demanding for another. So this is a very individualized piece of your 10th grade assignment. But what you'll do is pick the courses that you need to take, as well as courses that will challenge you. At this point, I want to tell you that picking every AP class that your core school may or may not allow 10th graders to take is not the best way to go. You need to pick the courses that are appropriate for you, and that will be courses that you can succeed in. When we say deepen involvement in extracurricular activities, we're talking about now starting to focus more on the activities that you'll want to pursue for the rest of your high school career. You're perfectly well, it's perfectly fine to drop any of the clubs or sports or anything else you started in the 9th grade if you don't find them to be fulfilling, because you have a limited amount of time, and we want to be sure that you're spending that time in a way that makes sense for you. So you want to look at extracurricular activities that you can put quality above quantity on, and things where you can seek leadership opportunities in the future. These activities are not limited to what you're doing in school. So you can look for things to do in the outside community as well. And we certainly encourage everyone to look for opportunities to volunteer, if not in the community at large or even globally, then in their own schools. I think every student will be able to find some way that they can contribute to the greater good. And that's something that I know colleges are also interested in seeing. Okay, not every school will offer the PSAT to 10th graders, but many schools will. And taking the PSAT early has some advantages. The PSAT is the pre-SAT or the pre-standardized test that most students will be taking. It doesn't count for, oops, sorry, go back. It doesn't count for your college applications. It does count for some summer programs that you might be applying for that will ask for PSAT scores. The pre-SAT gives you an opportunity to see where you stand in terms of academic ability as it's measured on this test. And it gives you the opportunity to focus on the areas where you're weakest. Next year in the 11th grade, you'll take the actual PSAT, which is given to 11th graders. And this becomes the qualifying test for National Merit Scholars. This is an honor that is limited to a small number of the total number of students who take the actual PSAT. And many colleges will recognize finalists and pre-finalists in terms of their academic status, and some of them will actually give merit scholarships to finalists. So it's an important step that everyone should take, even if they're taking the ACT as their primary standardized test. Okay, it seems early to start working on a preliminary college list, but it really isn't, because you're going to find that high school goes by incredibly quickly, and that suddenly you're going to be meeting with your high school college counselor and working on this list. The idea here is, if you're in an area with colleges and you can find the time to visit them, that's a great thing to do. You want to get a sense of what an urban college looks like, what a suburban or a more rural college campus is like. You may find likes and dislikes about the schools that you can start tallying in your mind. If you're able to visit any college fairs, definitely do that. It's never too early to start getting a sense of what these different colleges have to offer. And make notes, because you're going to forget. So when it comes to talking to your college counselor, or if it's one of us, a college consultant, we find that a lot of students will just say, I didn't like that school, or I love that school, which is only minimally helpful, because we'd like to know what it was that you liked or disliked about a school that you've added to your list. And again, we're saying outline your summer goals and do this early. The most competitive summer programs will require very early applications, and they fill up incredibly early as well. So that's something else you want to be aware of, and you want to take a look at as opportunities for researching these programs become available. Okay, so just in sum, we want you to never underestimate the importance of your coursework. That means both the rigor that you have in your curriculum as well as the grades. Think about your summers and remember there are internships, pre-college programs, jobs, research opportunities, and again, volunteer opportunities for you to look at. You'll be creating a balanced school list. So please, as you visit or look at schools, don't only consider the most famous and the most competitive schools. You'll be asked to make a balanced list of colleges, which will include not only the most competitive schools, but also schools that your counselors believe are likely for you. And remember that how competitive the past few years have been. So don't turn up your nose at some of the schools that we recommend that are less name-dropping worthy, in your opinion. Attend both in-person and virtual information sessions when you have the chance. And we're encouraging student autonomy and critical reflection at all stages of this process. So now we hope we're going to have a very engaged audience with lots of questions for us. Has anyone who hasn't put up a question yet, please go ahead and do so now. And we can begin with some of the questions that we know are out there among you. So one of the things that we definitely are going to want to talk about is it better to get a high grade in a less rigorous course? Excuse me, of course it's better. A lower grade in an incredibly rigorous curriculum or a course that's AP, IB, higher level, or honors, or to maintain those high grades in the less rigorous classes? And I'm going to turn this over to Marielle to answer.
It's a great question. So, and I probably nearly every answer Jill and I will give you will be, it depends on the type of student you have and the types of schools that they are looking to attend. So I'll just give you the high end answer and we can work our way down from there. But what I should say is I'll give you the answer I gave during the presentation, and then I'll give you the high end answer and work our way down from there. It's really important that the student challenge themselves according to the student. If that means that the student finds the standard level math classes challenging, then the student should be taking the standard level math classes. If the student does not find those classes challenging, then the student should challenge them by taking the upper level math classes. I use math as an example because it tends to be where that change in rigor lies. If a student is aiming for the most rigorous universities in the United States, universities that have a 10% less admission rate, that's how they are considered in terms of rigor, then the standard answer we give is it is better to get a great grade in a hard class. So you have to remember that these schools get tens of thousands of applications, and you want to stand out in terms of doing the best that you absolutely can. I think, again, you have to work within the framework of what you're going to be good at, and you have to work within the framework of managing your own stress and expectations. So if you know that taking 6 AP classes or 4 or 5 IB higher level classes or all honors classes is going to be too much, then you do not take those number of courses. Schools want to see that you're challenging yourself, but they don't want to see that you're losing your mind over it, because they're going to require that you do other things, right? It's not just the transcript, but also the extracurricular activities that schools are looking at. So it's really important to find and strike that balance. I know that's probably not the answer everybody was looking for. I'm sure you'd all like an individualized answer, but really challenging yourself to the best of your ability and what is challenging for you. Jill, do you want to take the first question?
While we're on that subject, let me just ask you, Marielle, is it true that an upward curve is going to virtually always make the difference, or are there schools where
an upward trend in grades will always make the difference? We would, you know what, not everyone is their best self in 9th grade. Not everyone is their best self at 14 years old. Schools understand that, and schools like to see that upward trend in grades. They like to see that as rigor increased, so did academic performance. To that end, if a student has a C on that transcript, what's the context of that C, right? Was it an aberration? Was it a really hard course? Was it a particularly hard year for that student? A C is not going to slam the door in anybody's face. I think that's really important to keep in mind. Something that comes up a lot, especially as you begin or have begun to go on admission tours or do information sessions, is you'll hear the word holistic a lot. And what that means is that schools really do take into account more than just grades and testing when they're reviewing applications. It's what we talked about when we talked about extracurricular activities and how summers are spent. They want to know that these will also be engaged. They want to know that these will be students who can do the academic work on their campus, but they also want to know that these will be engaged students at those schools. So all of that does play a role. A C is a blip, a C is a blip. I wouldn't let it slow you down. The next question, Jill, would be in terms of leadership roles. So do you think you could speak a little bit about whether or not that's expected, or how schools review dedication to extracurricular activities?
So I would say that the main thing schools are looking for is that students are committed. And that's why we've said if you have clubs where you're going to just be a member, just go to those meetings when you can, and not really contribute significantly, drop those clubs, because the idea is for you to take an ever deepening role in the club or activity, and to show that you are both involved and invested. So leadership is great, but a big club will only have one president, one secretary, one treasurer. It may have more offices, but you can play an important role by doing activities like being the communications person. I had one student who did all of the IT work for the club. The president could not have done his job without the support of a student who really had no named position, but was able to talk about his activity in his application. You also can look for ways to have an impact, and I think that is one of the most important things. So there are a lot of clubs or activities that students start, at which point I will say there's another one of these little slogans, which is, if you can't find it, found it, because most schools will allow students to start a club if they and their friends are interested in something that doesn't already exist at the school, and that's a great way to show leadership. But the colleges aren't looking for students who junior or senior year start something that will die when the student and his group of friends graduate. They're looking for impact in the sense that there's a lasting effect, that you've started something or changed or improved a club in a way that's sustainable, that will continue after you graduate. So yes, leadership is important, but I would say even more important than leadership is showing that commitment and engagement. Do you have anything to add to that, Marielle?
No, that was perfectly said. I couldn't agree more.
Okay.
In terms of summer programs, how do you find these? Where can you learn more about them? It's probably not the answer anybody wants, but truly a good Google search will get you some very nice information there. So it just depends on what your student's interested in. Generally like high school summer lab programs, high school summer science programs, high school summer math programs, high school summer business programs, pre-college programs would get you any of that information. I think there are some summer programs that are quite prestigious. There are some summer programs that are, I think, for students who have a very specific niche interest. Business usually is one of those. And then there are summer programs that I think are just really great ways for students to perhaps explore areas of study that they don't get to do in high school. So things like psychology or neuroscience just spring to mind. And that's just can be a nice way for students to say, oh, wow, I'm actually really passionate. And that's actually something that I think I'd like to do once I get to school, so that we would really consider school students to to do that. Some schools, and this is a testing question. So in terms of are some schools, what could we explain the testing field as it stands today at admissions? We certainly could. It changes from year. Sorry, Jill. I'll go ahead. Changes from year to year. It's just made these past few years really fun. Yeah, some schools are test optional. Some schools were test optional pre-pandemic, and I consider those schools to be truly test optional. And some schools are now test optional, but that usually comes with a caveat, and the language on their website makes that caveat at least clearer than murky, but maybe just murky. But our general rule of thumb, and one that I would urge you to consider, is that if you or your student is privileged enough to attend a really great school, then they are likely privileged enough to have the option of taking a test, and schools will want to see a test. This is where working with an independent counselor such as Jill as myself can come in. Also working with your school counselor, they should have an idea of what schools are truly test optional for you and which ones are not. There are some school systems now that are actually test prohibitive. So the University of California, not that I'm telling you all to apply there, the admission odds are low, but they do not consider any testing in terms of their application. So it's changes from year to year. This is the advice we're giving for this year. If you have the means to take a test, schools will expect you to take a test. Would you add anything to that, Jill?
No, I agree 100%. I think a lot of students ignore that fine print and will just assume that colleges don't expect them to test anymore. And that's part of what has inflated the number of applications to schools and made those acceptance rates look so terrifying now. It's kids who would have never applied before are now applying using that test optional option.
Correct.
So in terms of whether or not students are expected to take a foreign language for all 4 years, I think I'm going to also let you answer that, Marielle, because my answer is the more competitive the school, the more likely that those 4 years are expected. But
They are
I want to be
expected,
sure.
yes.
Yes, you agree. Okay,
They
so
are expected. Yes, they will. Again, there are exceptions to every rule here. If a student is fluent in another language other than English, and that is the first language spoken at home, that would be the single exception. Or they're educated in a language that is not English, then that would be the other exception.
And I have one more exception, because some of the students who took their foreign language in the 8th grade, right, and qualified for the state schools, they aren't even able to take 4 years in some of the high schools. So that would be
So if you've maxed out on the foreign language courses, and or your language of instruction is in something other than English, and or your native language is not English. Otherwise, you do need to take 4 years of a foreign language. And that's because they require you to take a foreign language once you go to those schools.
Okay.
Great question. You want to take that one, Jill?
Here's a question about whether universities make you apply to a major when applying. And my answer to that is, I would say most don't, unless you're applying to a college that is, or a university that's divided up into colleges within. So if you're applying to the School of Business or the College of the Engineering School, or like Georgetown, which is divided up into different colleges, the International Relations, the General Studies, etc., then yes, but the majority don't. And with the exception of those business, engineering, and any other specialty programs, you can change your major once you start. So if you're in the School of General Studies or the major liberal arts program, starting out as a student saying he wants to major in comparative literature does not require you to come out as a student who majored in comparative literature. You want to add to that, Marielle, or that's?
The only thing I would add to that is if it is a school that requires you apply to a specific major, you do want to read the fine print about how easy it is to transfer into other types of majors at that school. Some schools, it's actually, you can't. So it's really important to read the fine print there and make sure that you are applying to a school where they do want you to apply to a major or a school. But once you get there, as long as you have certain grades and etc., then you can transfer into a different program. So really important to keep that in mind. I do have, well, I'm actually curious how you would answer this question, Jill. Is it easier to get in if you apply to a program abroad first? So
like NYU in Florence. So
I mean, great question. There are a lot of schools that do this now.
6 or 8 years ago, that was the key to NYU, was Florence for some reason. Kids liked Florence. Now it's not only not particularly easier, but it also can be limiting because you're not just applying to a program abroad, you're applying to a specific program, such as the liberal studies at NYU, which is a 2-year program. So you have to be certain that that's the program you actually want to apply for. There are schools like Middlebury. There are a few that have on their applications, you could check off whether or not you are willing to go to you're willing to do a January start. So it's not necessarily a program abroad, but you're applying to the semester where the school may have more openings because of natural attrition of freshmen and students being abroad their junior year. A lot of this just has to do with housing. And then there are a lot of schools that will offer you this option, but don't allow you to choose it. So I know a lot of students, for example, Northeastern, they are deferred from their early application and then offered the opportunity to take advantage of the second semester entry on campus and a first semester abroad, but they weren't allowed to apply for that initially. That's one of them. There are some state schools potentially that might have second semester entry, but very few. And then there are the weird ones like Cornell, which has offered some of my students an actual second year entry, where they're required to attend another college or university prior to starting at Cornell, and then they're required to maintain a moderately high GPA. So I think there are more and more schools. Oh, also Boston University's general studies program isn't abroad, it's simply a winter entry. So there are all kinds of different options. I would say not necessarily easier. And to be sure you know what you're applying for.
Correct.
Oh.
Do you have to apply early to a school? And if yes, when do you have to have a finalist? Great question. Oh, there are all such nuance within this work. So we would recommend that you have a final school list by the end. Well, I would recommend you have in an ideal world, I would recommend that you have a final school list that you're working on by the end of June, at the beginning of the end of your junior year. That would be my best recommendation to you, because it gives you time over the summer to work on those applications and to have the majority of that work done before school starts in 12th grade, where your rigor has increased at quite a clip. You are participating in your clubs and activities at quite a high level. You also want to hang out with your friends and do fun things, and schools see your first quarter grades, so you want to make sure that those are really good as well. So I think a final school list sooner than later is better. Not all students have that final school list. A lot of students, a good number of students, are waiting on final test scores. A lot of students will sit the August SAT, or what is it, is there also July ACT, and see how they score. And then sometimes the list gets changed a little bit, but you should have a nearly final list by the end of June. I do recommend, it depends on the applicant, but by and large, I think applying early, particularly early decision, is a good strategy in these wild times we live in. It demonstrates to us, well, you are required to attend that school if you do go, and the admission rates, here's some good information for you. The admission rates in the early decision rounds are much more advantageous than they are in a regular decision round. You still have to be a good applicant for that school. But if it were me, and I used to travel with Northwestern University, and this is a statistic that they provided, so I use it widely and liberally. Northwestern in early decision accepts about 60% of their class in early decision. They probably get about a quarter of the applications than they do in regular decision. So they're taking a good number of the students who are applying early, versus in regular decision where you're taking 40%, but you're taking from a much larger pool. Statistically, you are less likely then to get in. I think you do have to have a strategy in this day and age. I think a strategy is really necessary, and we would really urge you to think about this strategically. It can be hard to have those conversations. Jill and I have hard conversations all the time. There are schools that don't have early decision that would be the ones a lot of people think of. They have what's called single choice early action, which means that you can't apply anywhere but those schools early, or that one school early, but you're just very unlikely to get an early offer there, and then you've wasted your early offers everywhere else, and then it's a real free-for-all come the spring, is my humble opinion. But there, students do things for other reasons. So I think it's advantageous to apply early to a school, particularly if you really love a school. If you don't really love any school, I can see why you would just throw your hat in the ring and use only early action, which is non-binding, as well as regular decision, also non-binding, and have your final choice by May 1. But in this day and age, I think early is wise. Would you add anything to that, Jill?
I just heartily agree. The numbers from the last year of the percent of students admitted either through early decision 1 or early decision 2 it was over 60% in many of the schools, with, as you said, the applicant pool for regular decision being X number of times greater than for the early decision. But
Balloons astronomically.
Yeah, but I will say you do have that ED2 option in many of the schools that you would be interested in, not the Ivies and not some of the very most competitive, but I think that it's something, again, that's why you want to discuss your options with your consultant or your high school counselor, and to remember that for students who need financial aid, you lose that opportunity to compare packages when you've committed early decision. And schools that say they meet full need, it's what they consider to be your full need, not necessarily what your parents considered to be your full need. So kids who are very, very, very money conscious might have second thoughts about applying early. That said, some of the schools will give an early financial aid read, which you could also request. And
yes, and most schools will have what they call a financial aid calculator on their website, which would give you a really reasonable idea of what you might expect from that school. And we always encourage students and families to use those calculators to give you a good idea. Students, we generally recommend have 10 to 12 schools on a list, and that list needs to be well balanced. What that means is that it is spread across that list are a range of schools that you are very likely to be admitted to, schools that have a 50% or higher admission rate, schools that are target schools, so schools that you are likely to have a letter of offer from, but in this day and age, who knows? And then a few schools on there that perhaps are a reach or a dream, and maybe that's where you'll use your early decision 1 or your early decision 2 to go to. So generally would say 10 to 12. Often schools will cap how many you're allowed to apply to. So some schools, the number I've generally seen is about 12 to 14 a school will cap, and then you're not allowed to apply to any more than that. The common application itself does cap you at 20, but I don't recommend it. I've never seen anybody have good success having applied to 20 schools. I'll say that. Applying to 20 schools does not mean you get 20 offers at all. In fact, it's generally the opposite. It's usually like 1 great offer and 19 rejections. So it does, the odds don't increase as you add schools. Do you want to take how is a counselor different than a consultant, Jill, or we could both answer that?
Certainly take how is a counselor different from your high school. Okay, depending on your high school, the workload of your high school counselor is certainly going to vary. There are some of the public schools, one counselor may have more than 100 students. What I have found, and I worked for many, many years in a school, was the most proactive students get the most attention, but in general, everybody knows the top few students and everybody knows the bottom students. And those great kids in the middle often just sort of slip through the cracks, and they're not getting the attention that they really need. So when you hire a private consultant, you're looking for that person who has the time to devote to your child or to you. You're looking for the person who knows a lot of niche schools, schools that are not the schools that everyone in your high school applies to, but might be perfect for you. You're getting the help you need in creating that story that you want to give a college, which doesn't mean packaging. It means helping you pick the activities, pick the courses, pick the essay topic, make sense so that a person reading your application can actually imagine you as a student rather than see you just as a number based on your GPA, your test scores, and what are potentially not very relevant letters of recommendation especially from a large school where the counselors basically can't write letters of recommendation or write the same letters for just about everyone. So it's that personalized help, and perhaps most importantly, we relieve stress. So this is a period where I can say that with my own daughters, we spent a lot of time arguing. I spent a lot of time walking past empty computer screens where they were supposed to be writing their Common App personal statements. I did a lot of screaming about save me $100,000, $200,000, don't go to college. So we can be that buffer that is between the student and the parents, and we help keep the kids on track. So we're the person who reminds the student, hey, you haven't finished this, or did you do that? Have you asked for your letters of recommendation? Who did you ask? And we perform a lot of, we do a lot of hand-holding for parents as well. So I'm sorry I didn't have a consultant. I would have wanted me. Anything else to add?
I would just say, I think on the outset, it's really important to know how much work this all takes. And it's, I would say, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jill, I think really good applications, and you have to write multiple essays for all the schools you're applying to, and the bigger the school, the bigger the name, the more you write. And I think you can reasonably expect to have to put in 30 hours of work on the whole process, which I hope sounds like a lot to you. It is a lot for a student to do. 30 hours is a lot of work. It depends on your student, of course, but it is work that has to be, you have to be dedicated to it, and you have to put in the effort in order to get the outcomes that you're looking for. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. This isn't just like write one essay and you're done. It's write the same essay multiple times to get it the best it can be and say what you really want it to say about you. And also make it easy for somebody to read as quickly as possible. And that is just part of the process. That's the only thing I would add there. What would we recommend for a student who would need financial aid but loves a particular school? And how can we use early decision, or is it less of a choice or reality for that student? Do you want to take that, Jill, or should I? Or both tag team?
I think we can do it together. From my experience, kids with serious financial need have a problem with the early decision unless they're looking at schools that offer a great deal of money. And these tend to be the less well-known schools. So again, I would say use your ED1. And if you can't afford the offer that the school makes, then you go back to the financial aid office and discuss your situation. They can't force you to go if you can't afford to go. There are no early decision police. There's nothing there, but you want to be truthful about it. It's not a way of getting out of an early decision acceptance. Some schools will be able to give you more money. I would say, again, the more competitive the school, the less likely that they're going to negotiate. And if you're an international student, be happy that they offered you anything, even though they say now they meet the full financial need. A lot of schools, it's a complicated process. There are great merit scholarships available up to full tuition, housing, everything at, again, schools that tend to be the less well-known schools. So when you're in love with us, it depends on how far that love will take you. And there's one other caveat that I've had. There are schools that will simply not accept you if they can't meet your need. Even though they would love to have you, they don't give you that opportunity to say, wait a minute, I can borrow the money from someone else. They just don't accept you. So you have to be cognizant of the fact that there are institutional priorities at play that sometimes impact a student's ability to receive the full need. So those are the sort of things that either your high school counselor or your independent consultant can help you with.
I think another good thing to do is understand how much need you can actually expect from schools before you even start out, before you even apply to those schools, right? I think that's always a good place to start. A lot of most financial aid offices are actually really nice and easy to work with. You can, if you're doing a school visit, you can call and make an appointment with the financial aid office and meet with a financial aid officer and talk about the reality of perhaps paying for that school. That would be one way to go about it. I think finding out exactly and these are hard conversations to have with students, but they're important ones to have. Why does a student love that particular school? But why do they actually love that particular school, right? Is it and I'm not being trite here, is it the football team? Is it the campus? Is it, are they particularly in love with one department and one professor? I doubt it's that, but if it were, that would be great. But are there other schools that have that feel, that have that particular special spark that they're looking for? Can you redirect? And I think it's important to talk about what that kind of debt looks like after college, right? And what it's like to have to pay that off. I think that's a really important conversation to have as well. So all really important and big conversations to have. Schools in general are not aware of schools do not know where else you applied once you've applied. They have no idea. You'd have to actually tell them where you applied. They don't know. They don't collude. That's illegal. They would never call and say, we have an applicant for so-and-so, and please don't admit them because we want them. None of that happened. So they have no idea where you applied or how many schools you've applied to. The only people who know that are the only person who knows that is whoever you've invited to review your common application. So generally your parents, your college counselor, your advisor, whoever, and they would know how many schools you applied to, but that's it.
Okay, so I think we're just about out of time. You have the slide here with the information about how to reach us. And if you'd be interested in doing a 30-minute session with one of us, please let us know. Just send us an email and we can arrange for you to speak with one of us. And you can just let us know if you have any questions that we failed to answer that occur to you later on. And thank you so much for joining us today. Bye-bye.